The date is November 20th, 2016. On that Sunday afternoon, Jimmie Johnson reached the highest pinnacle in terms of NASCAR success, winning the 7th championship, which tied the California native with the likes of Dale Earnhardt and Richard Petty. This will go down as one of NASCAR's most iconic moments, and I'm grateful having witnessed it firsthand. Not only did this victory collect him the accolation, but it snapped away a lot of the criticisms of Jimmie Johnson's career. No matter how many times NASCAR changed the car, rules, and points format during the decade, the 48 would rise to the occasion. Every single season since his 2002 rookie campaign, you knew Jimmie Johnson would contend for the Cup Championship. Coupling in 80 career wins and 2 Daytona 500s, he had a near-perfect career and was arguably the greatest driver of all time. That is, until just recently. Jimmie Johnson's last 3 campaigns have shown even the greatest have their falters, and it definitely deserves an analysis through time. 3 months after Homestead, a new season was dawning 293 miles away in Daytona. Jimmie Johnson, Chad Knaus, and longtime sponsor Lowe's would remain united for a 16th consecutive campaign. Much like 2010 and 2014, there was a bit of a championship hangover during the spring. Jimmie Johnson suffered tons of crashes and poor performances, ranking 14th in the playoff grid. In typical 48 fashion, Jimmie Johnson won 3 of the next 7 races, emerging as one of the championship favorites alongside Kyle Larson and MTJ. The most sentimental race of the 3 happened at Dover, as not only did JJ tie Cale Yarborough with 83 victories, but something unexpected happened on that afternoon. The crowd cheered. Now, of course, Jimmie Johnson is one of the most popular drivers in the sport, and he's rightfully earned that core fan base. What caught me off guard is that the 48 has outright dominated the Dover Downton, sweeping the Monster Mile clean as a rookie. Usually the fans don't appreciate drivers during their dominant stages. Just take a look at Jeff Gordon. NASCAR's faithful despised him until his decline from 2008 to 2010 and was easily greeted at cheers during his final victory. For a driver who's won 7 of the last 11 championships and completely drubbed his competition, it was a surprising turnaround for NASCAR's faithful. The next weekend at Pocono, Jimmie Johnson suffered one of his most violent wrecks of his storied career. I compare brake failures at the Tricky Triangle to the Superman Tower of Power, as all you can do at that point is hold on and pray for the best. Fortunately, he was able to walk away from his battered Lowe's machine, only lacking a shortage of breath. In terms of the long term, this crash could have provided a serious mental roadblock for the 7-time champ. The way Jimmie Johnson describes the crash sounds similar to Dale Jr.'s account shortly after gaining a concussion. Both drivers steered the car at a bad angle, which made the head-on impact even more violent. Ironically, after the wreck, a summer slump in performance lit up like a firecracker. Jimmie Johnson only led 16 laps and had a stretch of 3 DNFs in 4 races. Yet at the time, if you're a 48 fan, you shouldn't be too worried about the swoon from the top spot. We saw this movie back in 2013 and 2016 as Jimmie Johnson and Chad Knaus flipped the switch in Chicago. The windy stretch cleared up, and this resulted in championships number 6 and 7. Hendrick Motorsports is notorious for gaining speed in the playoffs, so the 48 should be among the favorites for Miami. That is, until the slump in performance continued throughout the 10 races. At no point did Jimmie Johnson strike me as a championship contender, as the 48 just wasn't leading laps and fighting for wins similar to the glory years. They got extremely lucky in the round of 12, especially with the wicked twister known as Kansas. Somehow the splitter wasn't completely ravaged by the infield grass compared to Brad Keselowski's incident 1 year earlier. Couple in a big wreck in DNFs from Kyle Larson and Matt Kenseth, the 48 scraped together enough points to make it to the round of 8. Once Jimmie hit the paperclip, however, the golden horseshoe was unquenched. Probably the weakest single-round performance besides Chris Buescher's horrendous round of 16. The chaotic end of Martinsville bolstered a very mediocre performance for the defending race winner. Returning to Texas, a track with countless wins and clutch moments, the 48 finished 27th, 3 laps off the pace. Finally, a blown tire at Phoenix hammered the final nail in JJ's chase for 8. Since his latest victory, Jimmie Johnson ended the campaign with only 1 top 5, 6 top 10s, and an average finish of 19th. For a 7-time champion, arguably the greatest in a generation, those are alarming statistics. Not to mention, he wasn't even the most competitive driver on the team. Chase Elliott was consistently faster, finishing better, and nearly snagged victories at Dover, Martinsville, and Phoenix. With that said, back in 2017, I figured Chad Knaus and the 48 team were sandbagging away the season. Realistically, they weren't going to compete against the 18 and 78 with an outdated aerodynamic model in the Chevrolet SS. The better long-term model for success would be to experiment with potential setups and get a head start on the likes of JGR and Stuart Haas. That's why I wasn't worried about Jimmie Johnson's 2017 performance. As for 2018, it was an awakening year for Hendrick Motorsports. A brand new Chevrolet model, fresh faces, as well as a brand new black and silver look for the 48 indicated a new era in South Florida. One other noteworthy change for the 48 relied with the departure of Ron Malik. After 16 years on the road and 7 championships won with Jimmie Johnson, Malik shifted to the vehicle assembly division within the organization. This meant the car chief role would undergo a change and likely wouldn't match the veteran's expertise that Malik carried for so many wins and championships. With that said, you still have Chad Knaus, you still have Jimmie Johnson winning races, and you have a much better aerodynamic model in that Chevrolet Camaro. Now go get some wins and go win that championship. Throughout the regular season, however, Hendrick Motorsports struggled greatly to adapt to the Chevrolet Camaro. Instead of competing for victories, all 4 cars were battling just to make the 16-driver playoffs. While Chase Elliott ultimately turned around his campaign, the Lowe's team became the almighty pros of mediocrity. In fact, Jimmie Johnson didn't lead his first lap of the season until race 14 at Pocono, which occurred under green flag pit stops. Nonetheless, the 48 was just good enough to make the playoffs, extending the record to 15 consecutive seasons. Once the first round began, par for the course, Jimmie Johnson and Chad Knaus flipped the ignition. Vegas looked promising until a late race incident, and Johnson quietly put together an 8th place result at Richmond. With 1 lap remaining at the Charlotte Roval, Jimmie Johnson had a 7-point advantage over the cut line as well as a chance to end his winless drought. We all know what happened next. Jimmie wheel-hops the final turn, loses the race, and gets eliminated in the first round. This was the first truly embarrassing moment for a driver graced with clutch moments and storied accomplishments. Honestly, I don't blame Jimmie Johnson for trying to win the race. Chances are he would have just gotten eliminated in the round of 12 anyway, with almost no chance of claiming championship number 8. The Charlotte Roval was an inaugural trophy nobody has ever lifted, and 7-time ultimately wanted that achievement more. Unfortunately, that was the closest chance to spraying champagne the 48 got in 2018. Jimmie Johnson, having won at least 2 races in every full-time NASCAR campaign completed, went winless in 2018. Combined only 2 top 5s, 11 top 10s, and only 40 laps led, it was a career low for the 7-time pioneer. A part of the downer campaign, changes needed to be made, without a doubt. Jimmie Johnson would end his iconic relationship with Chad Knaus, who moved atop the pit box for the struggling 24 team. Meanwhile, Xfinity Series crew chief Kevin Meendering got the call up to the big leagues, fresh off a consistent tenure with Elliott Sadler. As indicated with the likes of Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick, sometimes a change in direction is all that's missing for success. Sponsor Lowe's also shifted their money to the No Fun League, with the purple colors of Ally Financial throwing a season's worth of primary sponsorship to the table. For the first time since 2002, Jimmie Johnson was on a clean slate. That fresh start blossomed greatly during the non-points Daytona Clash, albeit he wrecked the entire field to win the race, but it was great to see our childhood hero reclaim his territory. Getting back to the black and white checkers would re-energize the oldest driver on the tour and hopefully rekindle his lost mojo. As the regular season took its first laps, however, the 48 has overgone a tire fire of inconsistencies and bad luck. 1 minute, Jimmie Johnson looks like his vintage self, racing hard for the lead at Chicagoland with back-to-back top 5 finishes. Over the course of a month, however, crashes at Kentucky and New Hampshire plus a mediocre finish at Pocono have left the 48 in uncharted territory, 12 points below the cut line with 5 races to go. This twisted roller coaster campaign prompted some changes as Kevin Meendering was removed as head crew chief. Many question the timing of this move, but honestly, this was a transition that had to follow suit. One of the biggest struggles for the 48 was long-run performance. Races such as Auto Club and Sonoma were shaping up to be top 10 outings until Jimmie Johnson slid down the leaderboard. The Ally team couldn't align more than 3 top 10 finishes in a row all season long, which goes back to the decisions on top of the pit box. Much like rookie drivers, a rookie crew chief was going to overgo these issues, so Kevin Meendering definitely deserves some leeway. He unfortunately just wasn't experienced and clear-cut for crew chiefing a 7-time champion. Replacing Meendering would be Cliff Daniels, who spent a majority of his career as a race engineer for the 48. Jimmie Johnson felt their chemistry was strong, and this was the missing ingredient to reignite the 48's competitive edge. As the calendar hit September, the season would come down to Indianapolis, a track where Jimmie Johnson has won 4 races in the past. With the confidence rising, it's time to shut up the keyboard warriors and renew the playoff streak to 16 seasons. The date is September 8th, 2019. 1,022 days removed from claiming number 7, Jimmie Johnson has missed the postseason. The only driver to qualify for every single postseason will not be among the 16 drivers competing for the season championship. Now, of course, a majority of the 48 faithful are going to pinpoint bad luck as the main culprit. To an extent, Jimmie Johnson had some misfortunate races to end the summer. Darlington was primed to be a top 10 finish before the Lady in Black enacted the big one to damage the 48. With that said, there were a lot of self-inflicted battle wounds that costed them in race 26. Jimmie Johnson made a rookie mistake at Michigan early in the race while running inside the top 10, battling Quint Boyer for position only to lose 3 position points at Darlington during stage 2. Not making a qualifying run at Bristol. I understand you need a car for the long haul, but track position is critical, especially in Thunder Valley. Incidents oftentimes occur in the eye of the storm, which is exactly what happened to Jimmie Johnson. The collision with Austin Dillon derailed his entire night, and it can easily get traced back to that 30th place starting position. Ryan Newman garnered next to no stage points, and Quint Boyer consistently screwed himself over and over during the summer. Yet both drivers and teams made the postseason without too much pressure. Jimmie Johnson and company didn't exactly have to do it right, but they consistently screwed themselves over, and that's why they didn't make the postseason. So if you're a Jimmie Johnson fan as well as a NASCAR fan, you're probably asking yourself one question. What the hell happened in the last 3 years? Personally, I think the crash altered his mental thinking in some sort of way. As of recent, Jimmie Johnson has struck me as a completely different driver since that Pocono wreck. The prime example relies with Watkins Glen, as he blew Ryan Blaney's mistake way out of proportion. Jimmie Johnson seemed to be consumed of the pressure, deprived of the poor results on the racetrack. It wasn't until Darlington and Indianapolis that Jimmie Johnson seemed to rekindle that motivation and start thinking towards the positives of turning this team around. Sports are oftentimes a huge mental game as well as physical, and I think for Jimmie Johnson it affected him a little bit in the long run. With that stated, you can't apply all the blame on the wheelman. Sometimes he's just merely the central face of a deteriorating race team. The central focus of Hendrick Motorsports has changed tremendously since the 2016 championship, and Jimmie Johnson has been greatly disfavored. Back in 2016, you had Casey Kane in the experimental 5-car, a concussion-prone Dale Jr. paired with a developing crew chief, and Chase Elliott learning the ropes of the NASCAR Cup Series. The 48 outweighed the other 3 cars by a landslide, so they likely got better technical support from the organization. Since that point, the emphasis has seemingly shifted to the young 3, and in a big way. Chase Elliott is entering his championship window, winning 5 races and renewing his season into November the last 2 years. Alex Bowman has revolutionized the 88 team, coupled with Greg Ives maturing as a crew chief. And finally, once the weak number 5 team has found its groove with Chad Knaus maturing young William Byron. Those are 3 cars, teams, and drivers on the positive long-term upswing, something lacking with the 48. Jimmie Johnson lost his crew chief, car chief, and likely other championship engineers and pit members behind the scenes. This is more reminiscent to the experimental 4th wheel at HMS to that championship core. If you've noticed throughout the course of HMS history, there's always that one team that lacks the performance compared to the other 3 cars. Now obviously the performance is picked up on the 48, but I think Hendrick Motorsports did that to try to get them into the playoffs. In fact, we saw that with Jeff Gordon in 2012 and 2013, as he had some faster cars and better performances to make the playoffs both seasons. Casey Kane obviously was able to win in 2014 to lock himself into the playoffs along with his 3 teammates, and had a fast car at Richmond in 2016. The only exception was 2018, but this was likely because Jimmie Johnson and Alex Bowman were both on the cut line. No discredit to Cliff Daniels, as he seemingly put Jimmie Johnson in better positions to win races and score points. With that said, it wouldn't surprise me if Jimmie Johnson becomes the 4th wheel at Las Vegas once again and struggles to finish inside the top 15. So in the end, it's sad to see a driver go from the highest of highs, winning a 7 championship, to this low point in record time. Jimmie Johnson was one of my childhood drivers, and every harvest season the 48 was plowing down wins and championships for the record books. He and Cliff Daniels can now relax, focus on getting top 10s, and maybe contend for a few victories. Just remember, the Charlotte Roval is coming up in 3 weeks. If he doesn't wheel hop turn 11, he might just claim the trophy. As for the long-term future, 2020 is a contract year for Jimmie Johnson, and so far I'd give it a 90% chance it's going to be his swan song season. Jimmie Johnson isn't going to turn back the clock to the glory days of 2006 to 2010, but he can indeed wind it up again and hopefully go out on a high note. If he can turn things around, it will show to the NASCAR fandom he was competitive to the end and strengthen his case as NASCAR's GOAT. As for the present day, did Jimmie Johnson achieve his ultimate goal of a 7th championship? Absolutely, it was one of the greatest moments in NASCAR history. In terms of the cost, however, it appears so far it's everything reminiscent of his competitive career. So anyways, this is NRF signing out, and just remember, life's a beach and then you drive.